All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining in from. My name is Paul Wismar. I'm a senior systems consultant with Nortech Communications. And today we're going to be talking about identity management and single sign-on, which has been trending pretty hot in the technology space right now. And I think it's something that's important for a lot of people. So hopefully you'll find the webinar informative today, and away we go. So I always like to provide a little bit of context for about what the discussion is going to be about today, sort of set the stage of where we are. So today's world is changing, right? The world before was employees in the same physical location. Oh, sorry, I'm being told I lost my audio. Is that better? Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry.
Thanks. Okay, great. So I don't know how much of that you heard, so I'll just recap real quick. So the world before was, on-prem employees in one place. The world today is people are all over the place, using different devices to connecting to cloud, connecting to on-prem, connecting to mobile applications. And CIOs moved from operating technology, where today they're really business enablers for different aspects of the business, and software is all over the place. So that actually creates an identity crisis. No! So this isn't an existential type question. What it really is, a lot of customers that I deal with are saying, Paul, I've got this issue. I use one set of credentials to log into my computer. I use another set of username and passwords to log into my email. Then there's another one for my Facebook app because I maintain it for the marketing department. And then there's another one for our Salesforce login, another one for our HR login. And it's just crazy trying to remember all of this stuff. And, I completely agree. It's become burdensome to remember so many different usernames and passwords, and then that contributes to a lack of security because people tend to write things down or keep a spreadsheet somewhere that's not properly secured. So it really takes an identity network to address this identity crisis that's going on in businesses today. There really needs to be some point of centralized management, and there needs to be a way to future-proof integrations to applications, and there needs to be a system of record, and we need to be able to do this from different locations and different devices. So the solution, Nortech has, we do a lot of work in the identity space, and we've decided to partner with an organization called Okta, to help us solve all these problems of identities, of disparate logins, of disparate credentials across all our varied systems. So Okta, so what is Okta exactly? So Okta is a cloud-based identity management service where you can securely manage access to all your applications, be them on-prem or in the cloud, for all of your people from all of their devices. Okta is also single sign-on from any device. Okta is about users accessing applications securely without having to struggle with the usernames and passwords, so taking that burden away from the users. Okta is also a central place to manage directory services for example, Active Directory synchronization, and we'll get into that. Logistically, so I'm gonna go through slides for like 10 minutes to talk about the offering, and then I'm gonna run through a demo, and then we're gonna open up the Q&A. Sorry, I meant to mention that earlier. So yeah, directory services as well. So there's provisioning, workflow, reporting, and Okta is also strong multi-factor authentication, both to the service itself and to your applications. And Okta today already has thousands of pre-integrated cloud and web applications, including Office 365, Google Apps, Salesforce, Box, and Workday. Okta also allows you to create your own application integrations in a quick and easy way, and I'll show you some of this when we get into the demo. So Okta is a lot of different things. It's a really robust offering. It is an identity management solution, but there's all these ancillary benefits to a centralized system for access and identity management. And we'll be highlighting this stuff as we move throughout the webinar today. So on the overview, I think we mentioned, once already. So single sign-on from anywhere, right? That's from any device, from any location. Directory integration. 90% of businesses today run Active Directory, so that's a source of identity already. So one of the big things there is integrating all these different sources for identity into a central place. We get reporting. We get Active Directory password management. That's self-service password reset for your end users. We get strong authentication via multi-factor authentication, and I'm going to demonstrate some of that stuff. We get a policy engine, so we can apply different sorts of policies to different groups of users. We can do business-to-business federation right from the Okta service itself. We can do provisioning and synchronization, so sync would be from your different repositories of identities, the big one being Active Directory. And we can also take an identity, we can take a set of credentials from Active Directory, and we could use that to provision into other services, cloud services, like, for example, Office 365 or Salesforce. Universal Directory is Okta's central repository where all of the identities that you have today are syncing into. And then we can do some advanced provisioning type things where we can set certain levels of access when we're provisioning user accounts into different applications. And then, of course, mobile identity. So just to give you an overview of what the architecture looks like. So Okta has an application network, like I said, with thousands of pre-integrated applications, and it's most of the big ones that we use today. Then we've got our logging and reporting, security and policy, strong authentication with multi-factor, integration with our on-premises apps. We've got provisioning and synchronization, like we said, single sign-on, universal directory, and all that sits on top of this extreme redundancy. And that's not just a marketing term. Okta rides on AWS, and the amount of redundancy that's built in it. There's different cells, and those cells replicate across the country, and to truly achieve zero downtime. The service is actually never taken offline, and it's encrypted, and it's tested by third parties, and it's SOC 2 type compliance. So it really is, built within the cloud in the most secure and redundant fashion imaginable, and they publish out the uptime over at okta.com/trust. So I'd invite you to go take a look at that, because it's been at zero for quite some time, zero downtime. So excuse me, we touched on this a little bit, and sort of the vision of Okta is all of your people, and your people aren't necessarily just your employees. They're your customers or your partners or your contractors. It's all of their devices, and then we switch over to the right hand side of the screen here. It's your cloud apps, it's your on-premise apps, and it's your mobile apps. So Okta is the wrapper around all of these things, this central repository to be able to control identity to all of these different things. So there's kind of some patterns that have emerged in how customers use Okta. And at a high level, Okta customers are either organizations who are adopting cloud apps and mobile devices, or they're companies building an app or product themselves. So the first category, there's sort of two distinct use cases. So number one is just making it easier for employees to access cloud and mobile applications and increase security at the same time. And in almost all cases, employees are already in a user store like Active Directory, and they want to extend access. So the second part here is collaboration with companies that you do business. You could be a shipping company, for example, and you need to federate with your distribution channels, or you could be just two partners in the same type of business. And you can actually manage identity from within Okta to enable that relationship between the businesses without having to build out all kinds of additional infrastructure. And the third one is, hey, maybe my product is just an application, and I need an identity provider for that application. I need a way for customers to be able to consume my product. And in order for the customer to consume the product, they need to have an identity. So Okta is a great use case for that scenario as well. So getting started with Okta, typically it's sort of, this linear thing where you're first starting with employees, you're getting them access to their applications. Another great example is, acquisition. Sometimes you're accessing things across different domains. Well, Okta makes it real easy to handle that scenario as well, because we can sync both of those domains up into Okta itself. And we could do some HR-driven IT provisioning. There's something called where your identity is mastered, which essentially just means where was your identity first created and what's going to be the controlling identity if you're syncing from multiple sources. And we'll see that'll become a little bit more clear. And then strong authentication, like we talked about. We switch over into the middle column. That's that external user access to portals. It's business to business federation, and we're getting a single view of users across those things. And then as we move over to the right, like I said, it's that identity layer. So I'm publishing out my application that I need to be consumed, and I need an identity provider in order to do that. So Okta is that identity network, right? So it's already used by over 4 million people today on more than 10 million devices, and there's over 3,000 application integrations that exist in Okta's application network today. So there's thousands of applications, there's business stuff, and when we see the Okta portal and we see the applications published to us, we're going to see that it's not just the business stuff though. There's also personal applications in there. For example, you want to use LinkedIn or allow your employees to use Facebook or what have you, and you can control whether or not they're allowed to do that. But from my seat, it's a quick win for adaptation, right? So I want them to adapt to Okta from the business perspective, and I might win them over by allowing them to have access to personal applications in there. And these are deep integrations, so it's SAML authentication, so, not seeing usernames and passwords. And it's constantly monitored and it's constantly expanding because it is a cloud-based thing and it's never taken offline. And then there's new application integrations continually added. So if your application doesn't show up today in the pre-integrated stuff, it might be there tomorrow if there's enough of a demand for your particular application. Just to switch gears a little bit here, and we're not going to get super deep down into the nuts and bolts of what the Okta integration looks like. I mean it's largely simple overall. There is some complexity depending on some of the scenarios, but I just wanted to put this in here just to give you an idea of what the setup with Active Directory is. It's literally just a little agent that sits behind your firewall and communicates via what's called long polling up to the Okta service. So it's just a little application we install on your domain controller, no changes to your network whatsoever. And we can sort of contrast that with there's other identity management type systems where you need all kinds of on-prem infrastructure. You need load balancers, you need multiple servers, and for what's called an identity bridge, it takes a couple of days to do the synchronization to get all your identities up into the Okta service. It requires firewall changes, dedicated hardware. Okta doesn't require any of that. So 4 meg install, 20 minutes to sync your directory, no firewall changes. And we'll install that agent on multiple domain controllers to give you high availability. So the largest application integration that Okta does is with Office 365. And what's pretty remarkable about that is, I don't know if any of you here today are Office 365 customers, and if you wanted single sign-on with Office 365, you needed to deploy ADFS or Active Directory federated services. And that requires at least 2 to up to 8 servers, depending on the size of your environment. So, it's a big investment to deploy ADFS, on premises today. Okta can completely displace that. So you don't need to use ADFS any longer if you're using the Okta service. So all of your single sign-on would take place through the Okta service rather than ADFS. So and again, there's no network configuration there. We have the built-in high availability just from the agents that we install on your domain controller. It doesn't have to be on a domain controller. We can have any domain joined computer, and it's super easy to set up, and everything is centrally managed. So kind of a lot going on in this slide, but I liked it because it kind of shows all of the areas where we can either pull in existing identities or push out to identities, based on some parameters that we set. It shows our customers, up in the upper left-hand corner, our employees, and how everything can just sort of centrally be managed from within the Okta service itself. So kind of a busy slide, but I think it's a nice just visual to see that, hey, yeah, we can bring in all these on-prem systems. We can bring in SharePoint. We can bring in, all of our existing stuff. And just to talk a little bit about, Okta as a company, because it's not yet a household name. I would argue that it probably will be over the next few years. So they are the market leader in, identity and access management in terms of identity management as a service. So, as we talked about, it's all your users, devices, and apps. You get your single sign-on, strong authentication, provisioning, analytics, all those pre-integrated applications, and, we can also integrate with your legacy identity infrastructure. And Okta was started by, teams. They have a great team that came from, well-respected big companies. So it really is a veteran team that's putting this whole product together for us. And it's enterprise service. Like I talked about, the architecture is just absolutely phenomenal. They really did take a lot of time and a lot of money to build an infrastructure that has zero downtime, and it's supported 24/7. And if any of you pay attention to Gartner's Magic Quadrant, you've probably seen this before. Okta is the clear leader in the identity as a service space. There are some other players that Okta has been able to pull out ahead of, and I think for quite some time they will be the clear leader. And when all this stuff shakes out, I think that Okta will still be at the top of that. And hey, this is cool. Okta's free for one application, right? And one application can be Office 365, which in fact is their largest integration that they do. So, you're not going to get all the other bells and whistles, multi-factor authentication, and some of the policy-driven stuff. But hey, you can get started with Okta and you can use it for federating to Office 365. Cool. So that brings us to our demo. Thank God those slides are done. All right. Okay, so when you sign up for Okta, you're going to get it's going to be yourdomain.okta.com. This is my test environment, so I'm in oktapreview.com. It's the same thing. It's just 1 week ahead of the actual Okta's production environment. So, you'll have yourbusiness.okta.com, and that's the URL that your users would go to sign in. And if you are on a Windows domain joined PC, you don't even have to sign in here. We can do integrated desktop single sign-on. So all you have to do is put your username and password into your computer when you log in in the morning. When you log in the morning, you launch your browser with the homepage set to, yourorganization.okta.com, and it pulls that authentication through. So you're literally never entering a username and password whatsoever if you're on a domain joined PC within your network. So let me just get logged in here, and I'm going to start first with showing it to you from the user's perspective. And then, depending on how much time there is, I can go back and we can step through some of the admin tasks. So I'll just log in with one of my users that I've created here in my test environment. Oh, sorry. It'd be good if I can type. And not add extra letters where they're not supposed to be. There we go. And you saw my image pop up, so that's when you type your username correctly, your image will pop up. Okay, so this is your Okta dashboard, and this is where all of your applications are published to your Okta dashboard. They're actually called chiclets in Okta speak. And you notice up here I've changed the branding on this just to make it look specific to Nortec. You could change the whole look and feel of these portals. Right now, I have the ability to add applications. You can take that away if you don't want to give users the ability to do that. Like I said, I would argue that that's a good thing. Let people bring in some of their personal stuff because, it garners support for what the business is trying to do by pushing out these applications to them, or publishing them out rather. So from the user's perspective, I mean, it's pretty clean, sleek. I've configured behind the scenes all of this stuff and published them out to the users. And like I said, if there's time, I can show you a little bit of that piece of it. But literally, this is it right here. So if I came into work in the morning and I have desktop single sign-on configured, I don't have to do anything except launch my browser, and all of my applications are right here in front of me. And then I don't have to do anything to get into those applications because behind the scenes, that application integration's already been done for me. So if I'm an end user, I literally have to do nothing and remember nothing. I launch my browser. If I have desktop single sign-on integrated, I'm right here. I see all my chiclets that have been published to me, and I literally just click on what I want to do. So I want to open up my mail. I click on the chiclet. I'm automatically logged in via an authentication mechanisms that Microsoft uses called WS-Fed. There's a process to go through to set that up. It's not crazy difficult. It's actually pretty straightforward. So I'm right in my mailbox now, right? So same thing with anything, with my OneDrive, so let me step back a second here. So all of these 365 specific chiclets are actually considered one application. They all reference the same Office 365 tenant, so they're not considered separate applications. So if you wanted to start free, you could start with Office 365 and you have each one of these chiclets. I just wanted to make that distinction that just because there's multiple chiclets for the same application doesn't mean Okta considers it to be two different applications. So, I mean, literally we click Sites, we get right into our SharePoint Online portal, and from there, and because I'm already pre-authenticated, I can actually jump around within the 365 service itself. So I can head over to my public site, and I'm not going to be prompted for creds when I'm moving around because that authentication token is carried through. If I go back out, so a little bit about, so at Nortec we use a system to enter our time for billing for our customers, and I set up this did not exist as a pre-integrated application, so I set this up literally in like 20 minutes. So this is a web application that Nortec uses on premises, like I said, for entering our time for customer tracking and that sort of thing. So just to give you an idea what that experience is, this is a homegrown application with a web front end, and you could say I'm passed right into that application. So just demonstrating that if you have web apps today, it's typically pretty easy to integrate that stuff into Okta. And then this is just my personal LinkedIn account. So if I wanted to add an application, it would bring up the sort of database of the Okta application network, and I would just search for whatever it is that I wanted. If I wanted Facebook, I click add. I would put in the creds for that. Oh, and another cool. Well, sorry, there's a bunch of stuff I want to show you, so I'm trying to figure out the best way to do it. Let me log out of this person because I want to show you the multi-factor authentication piece. And we'll log in as this person. Okay. So now I'm being prompted, right? So let me set this up now. I'm going to mirror my iPhone screen here so you guys can see this whole process. Okay, cool. So you saw back here when I went to log in as this other person, I have multi-factor authentication turned up for that person. You can define it by groups, by individuals, by departments, however you want to define it. You can use the policy framework that I spoke of in order to determine that. And you can do it authenticating to the Okta service itself, like I have it configured now, or you could do it to an individual application, or you could do it to both if you really wanted to get super secure with things. And you can also determine from where someone needs to do this. So we can build out some logic within the policies to say, hey, if you're not in this IP range, which is associated with our different business locations, then I need you to have to use multi-factor auth. So let me switch back over here. So Okta Verify, which is this application here, it's a free download from the App Store. And what it does is it generates the code for us to be able to log into the service. So if I was doing this all from my phone, I'm going to show you the Okta mobile application in a little bit, and I was configured for multi-factor authentication, I can actually copy it from here and then paste it into the mobile application. But for our purposes today, we'll just type it in, so 048477. And then I'm in. And it'll generate a new code every minute, I believe it is. Cool. So this is a different account with the multi-factor authentication turned up. You can see within this account I actually did add Facebook, and the reason I did that is I wanted to illustrate the fact that, say I work in the marketing department or in HR or whatever, and there's a shared account for Facebook, right? And then how many times does this happen? Or there's a shared account for accessing bank accounts or HR systems, and somebody leaves the organization, and we say, uh-oh, that person knew the password, and now we need to change that password. Well, that completely goes away, because as the Okta administrator, I can publish out an application to my marketing department for Facebook, and I can control what the password is behind the scenes so that that password is never revealed to the end user. So if we have, people leaving the organization, we don't have to worry about them having access to things that are really critical. So I mean, that's something I think is pretty amazing in and of itself. Despite all the other great stuff, the single sign-on and your directory integration and all that kind of good stuff. So I just wanted to point that out. And then, this is just my personal Facebook account, but it's the same kind of behavior. You're automatically brought over and logged in, and I don't want to reveal anything in there, so I'm going to close that quickly. Cool. So, we talked about, okay, so we're seeing what the behavior is from the portal perspective from when you're sitting at your computer, but what does it look like when I'm out on my mobile device? We talked about it being the same, all your people, all their devices from anywhere, right? So let's take a peek at what that looks like. And I probably just have to redo my mirroring session here, so give me a sec. Okay, cool. So let's close up, and that's called Okta Verify. I can't remember if I mentioned that, but you could also use like existing RSA integration can be brought into Okta. You could use Google Authenticator. It's a similar type thing where a random code is generated every 60 seconds. Okay, so Okta Mobile. It's always going to require a PIN, and we can force that from the administrative side, but even if we don't, it always has to have a PIN to get in to Okta Mobile. All right. So here's my dashboard, right? It's exactly the same as the applications that were published to me that we saw the first user login that I was using. So everything is right there for me. It looks exactly the same. And this is on my iPhone. I actually don't have my iPad today. I apologize for that. But it looks a lot nicer on the iPad because the application will actually be brought up alongside of it when you have it in landscape mode. When you're doing it from the iPhone, it's just going to bring it up right in the same screen. And it doesn't push you out. It all occurs within the Okta Mobile bubble, so it doesn't call the other applications on the phone itself. It does it all from within the secure container. That's how you can achieve that. But same exact behavior, right? So here I am inside of our application that we use at Nortec. If I want to get to my Office 365 mailbox, I can do that. It's the same sort of thing. And you're right into your mail or your team sites or whatever else. And like I said, it's a much nicer experience on the iPad because it's bigger. And we just click in the upper right hand corner here to get back out to our applications. And So, pretty seamless, pretty similar, well, very similar experience for the end user, and no sort of confusion. So, I like to present it like that so that you can see just how easy it is for people, um, to get this single sign-on. And like we said, if we integrate desktop single sign-on, they literally don't have to enter anything at all to get single sign-on into their applications. And the sort of headache of remembering usernames and passwords, or the problem of employees leaving the organization, a lot of that stuff goes away. And it's really simple, nice, clean look. And honestly, setting it up is not real difficult either. I mean, sort of one of the things about Okta is its simplicity, right? I mean, it's easy to get up and running quickly with a lot of applications. So with that being said, we've got a little bit of time. I'd like to leave at least 20 minutes or so of questioning. So I'll sort of breeze through the administration part just a little bit to give you an idea where you can do some of this stuff. And I just need to get logged in on my admin account. Cool. So this is my admin account. As you see, I don't have any applications published to myself, but I get this other button up here in the upper right hand corner, and I click that, and that brings me into actually the administration, all the management of Okta, of making all this stuff work, right? So a big thing to look at here is your dashboard. If there's anything going on with anything, be it provisioning, or there's user accounts that are not activated, you haven't assigned them a license, anything like that, your dashboard is your friend. That's where you want to look at all times. And you also always see the status of your Active Directory agents. It's going to be red, yellow, and green. Mine is yellow because I only have a single domain controller in my test environment. If I had two, that would turn up to green. If the Okta service was having trouble communicating, which typically means the agent's not running on your DC, or your DC's down, then it would be red. So, one of the big things to look at, because like I said, 90% of organizations are running Active Directory, so that's going to be our primary sort of our master, the source of our identity. So we'll switch over to the People tab, and this is just everybody I've imported from Active Directory here. Groups, you can bring in all your AD groups. It does by default. And one of the things to note is we can pick and choose which OUs we want to sync up to the Okta service. We don't have to grab your root and bring absolutely everything in. So, if you only wanted to try out Okta for some people and bring in some, excuse me, and bring in some OUs, we have the ability to do that. We switch over to the directories tab here. This is where we actually add our directory. We download the AD agent from here, and then we can do some configuration on our actual connectivity to the directory there. And profile masters, this is what we sort of spoke of a little bit about. So there's different, you're syncing from different identity repositories, and you can decide which one you want to be the master, so which one wins out if there's any discrepancies, so to speak. And applications, this is where you want to add applications. So, this automatically is going to feed from the thousands of pre-integrated applications that Okta has. So if you just using Facebook as an example, you just search for whatever it is. It'll be Okta verified, or sometimes you'll see community verified, which means someone in the Okta network has developed it, and Okta said, hey, yeah, this works great, let's add it to the repository, right? And you click on it, and it's going to ask you some questions about how you want to present it, what the behavior is going to be like, and then you go into the next step of assigning it to people. So I'm just going to go back there, and once you assign it to that person, it will then become visible on their dashboard of when we looked at it from the user perspective before. So out on the dashboard here, I'm sorry, on the applications dashboard. So once you bring in the application and you assign the application, then it shows up here. Pretty straightforward. So applications, and bear in mind, it's not just Active Directory. You can bring in LDAP. You can bring in a multitude of different directories into the Okta service. And security, this is where we can set some policies for things. We set up the lifetime for the organization, whether or not we want people to have the remember me checkbox. Talking about the pin on Okta Mobile that we saw, authentication. This is what, there's AD, LDAP, the multi-factor stuff that we looked at, and we can say, okay, yeah, we're going to use Okta Verify, which is what I showed you. We can use Google Auth. There's a bunch of different things that we could use. RSA, if you're already using that today. We can define when the multi-factor auth policy is enabled and how often. So you can get pretty granular, and here's the public IPs. So that's how I can control stuff. If I put my public IPs of my different business locations in here, it knows not to prompt me when I'm connecting to the service from those IPs, but I can have a different behavior when I'm outside of the network in terms of the way I'm interfacing with it. We can do inbound SAML. We're not going to get into that. That goes into service provider and identity provider and that sort of stuff. Just-in-time provisioning means everything is ready to go the first time that person logs in, and bam, everything's created, provisioned, your workflow starts, and all that kind of stuff. Our network, this again, you can get a little bit more granular with the public IP stuff here. Administrators is exactly that. Who has permission to do what in Okta? There's 4 different administrative permissions that you can give, and some, like a read-only admin and a super admin and that sort of stuff. And then the actual API itself is exposed if you needed to write any custom sort of stuff to interact with Okta. And then the reporting piece is super robust. There's tons and tons of different reports that we can the analytics that we can pull out of everybody that's connecting to the Okta service. I'm not going to read them all out to you, but there's tons of different stuff that we can do. And those are just the canned reporting stuff. And then settings is just about the account. How do we rebrand it? Like I showed you, I put the NordTech logo on the front page of our portal. We can change the colors. We can change technical contact. All the kinds of stuff specific to the look and feel of the portal itself. We do within the settings here. So I mean, that's kind of what I had for today. I want to leave, like I said, about 20 minutes for Q&A. And like I said, the idea of today was not to dive technically into the offering, but to just show it from that user perspective, right? Just showing the simplicity, the ease, how it takes away that cumbersome managing all kinds of usernames and passwords for users. And we also saw how the experience is the same from mobile device to browser, and I think it's pretty apparent just in looking at the service that it really does simplify things, and it really is pretty easy to get up and running with Okta, and it'll connect to your cloud-based applications, it'll connect to your on-premise web apps, so you can really bring everything all into one place. So with that being said, I'm gonna unmute the audience, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to fire away.
What sort of customer do you see using this, Paul? Like, who would be a good candidate?
I mean, it's anybody really. It can be a really small customer who only has 1 or 2 apps, or maybe you just want multi-factor authentication. I think the lowest offering from Okta is a couple bucks per month per user. So I mean, if literally you could buy it just for multi-factor authentication, you don't have to spend tons and tons of money on a solution like RSA, for example. Or, a lot of smaller customers even only have Office 365 and they want single sign-on, but they don't want to deploy the infrastructure to do that. So it scales from the very smallest company to the largest company, hundreds of thousands of users.
How technical do you have to be to sort of get it all up? What do you think?
It's not super technical. I mean, if you're pretty savvy, it's easy to get up and running, especially with the pre-integrated stuff. It's real easy to get up and running with that stuff. When you're talking about a big enterprise and they have homegrown applications, you have to do some programming in that sense. But yeah, the stuff that's pre-integrated, the O365, the Google apps, all the big ones, all the big web apps, that stuff it's pretty straightforward to get up and running with that.
Paul, was at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned SAML. Is that the requirement of the application to use
No,
Okta?
no, it's not a requirement of the application necessarily, but that's the best way to do it. So if your application is capable of doing SAML, that's the way that I would, recommend that you do it. But you
Are
don't
there
have
any,
to.
are there any other supported interfaces?
Yeah, I mean, you could also do what's called secure web authentication, which essentially is just you enter the username and password once, and then it's remembered. And then there's actually, oh, I guess the part I didn't mention is there's a browser plugin for any browser that you use to access the Okta service, and that plugin will actually detect any applications that you have that are secure web authentication, and it'll prompt you anytime that your password needs to be reset. So, I mean, what you want to strive for is SAML, certainly.
Okay.
That's the best way to do it. And, most companies today, I mean, because SAML is a standard SAML 2 has been around for a while. Most companies today will write applications like that and publish the way to connect in doing it that way. But if not, you can reach out and ask them. I've seen that companies are willing to work with you to make that happen.
Okay. And my last question is, from a company intranet perspective, once my employees launch their browsers, they go into the intranet, which gives them our not only our business application, but also their personal application that we allow them to use. How would I immerse or bring Okta into that intranet?
There's a couple different ways you can do it. I mean, you can literally just link off of that intranet to the Okta service itself. And if we're doing the desktop SSO, you'll be fine. They're just clicking on that link to get over to their applications. Or you can actually embed it. It's a little bit more work to embed it, but you can do that as well. So there's a couple different approaches. You want quick and dirty, just link. But if you want to actually embed it, it's a little bit more work. Not challenging, but it's just going to take a little bit longer.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, how is this licensed then? And do you know what the pricing model is?
It's licensed per user, and you sort of at the low end you get the least amount of features, and at the high end you get the most amount of features. It starts at I think it's $2 per user per month, and that'll give you integration for applications, but you don't get like MFA, you don't get like directory synchronization. So I think what's called SSO Plus is like $4 a month per user, and then you get up into $8 a month is like what they call enterprise. And then that gives you like some of the provisioning stuff. So if you create a user in AD, you want to have them auto provisioned in Office 365 or auto provisioned in whatever it is that you use, other applications that you're feeding into. That's enterprise. That's $8. And then there's an enterprise plus, which we actually have to get a quote from Okta to figure out what that's going to cost. But I mean, it's really based on use case. What are you thinking to do with it? Type thing determines which price range you fit into. And you can grow, right? You can start.
Can you mix and match users, or is it all at one level?
I'm not sure, actually. I'm not sure if you can do that.
Okay.
I can get you an answer to that question, though, for sure.
All right.
But, yeah, and the nice thing is, I mean, you could always start at the lowest end, right? And just, a couple bucks a month per user, start with a handful of users and kind of move up from there. If you don't have a particular use case in mind, you can kind of, try it out and then move up from there. But yeah, I can certainly get you an answer to that question.
Okay.
I'm sorry, who is this speaking?
This is Chris Benning from United Lender Services.
Chris Benning. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Chris. It was a good question. I'll certainly follow up with you.
Okay.
Anybody else? All right. Cool. Well, if there's no other questions, thanks everybody for your time today, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And like I said, this was being recorded and will be posted up on the website. If you want to refer anybody to it, you can certainly do that. And with that, I guess that wraps. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
All right.